Hi everyone, and welcome back to Financial Basics. Today I want to be talking about the second most important thing that you can do for your child. And the reason why I say the second most important is because the most important thing is pretty obvious to most parents. So I want to talk about your why you're doing this, why you're making the decision to help your child financially in the future. What is the most important thing that you can do for them? What are the typical costs that a parent thinks about when they're going, okay, if I'm going to make an investment now, what is that going to cover down the road? Then I want to spend some time talking about Coast FI, so that's coasting financial independence. And then I want to really dig into some of the numbers, talking about the power of time and demonstrating the power of time and the value of investing early. And then I want to talk about generational wealth and building a future, not just for your kids, but potentially for your grandkids. And then we can just give an overall summary. So the main reason why I want to talk about the why is because it's a good self-reflective question to ask yourself. Why does it matter to you what happens to your child and their future? And you're thinking about things 20 years, 30, or even 50, 60 years into the future. And you need to be able to reflect on yourself and just get a good understanding of that sacrifice that you're making today to help your child in the long term. And the typical answers that you get are along the lines of, you don't want them to potentially struggle and worry the way that you do. You want to support them in that. You want to set them up for their future. You might want to give them something that you missed in your childhood or missed while you were growing up. And you want to make sure that they aren't a financial burden on you later in life. So what you're actually doing here is you're almost taking out an insurance policy against the situation where they might need additional help down the road. They need a place to stay because they can't afford rent or can't afford a place to live. They need to borrow your car, whatever the case may be. There are additional burdens here down the road, and you want to offset those burdens by taking out an insurance policy today to protect you from that down the road. So the most important thing that you can do, and I just want to touch on this briefly, is teach your child to manage money. Show them how to save, teach them how to give, teach them how to care for others, teach them about delayed gratification, living within their means and below their means, appreciate what they have in life, and teach them a collection of other financial and life lessons. So the typical costs as a parent, some of the things that you want to look at as you go and as you think about your child's future, what you end up doing is you're thinking about what you did in the past or what you plan on doing. And that's typically a house, covering university, covering the wedding, or their first car. And the first thing I want to mention, and this is more of a disclaimer, is that the problem with a lot of these is you don't know they are going to happen. But what I mean by that is these are not guaranteed. What if they just decide to rent for the rest of their lives? What if they don't get married and there's no wedding? Or if they do get married, they don't want to have a wedding? What if they decide to skip university? Or what if they decide they don't actually need a car? But I do want to do the maths on these things because I want to demonstrate the power of compound growth. And I want to show you that for a very small sum of money, you could actually help them tremendously down the road because of that compounding power. So the average age and this is just data that I'm looking at, the average age in the UK for buying these things or going through these things. You're going to get a house when you're 34 on average. You're going to do university when you're 19. Your first wedding will be 34, and your first car you'll be 20. Oops. So let's just look at that. Average price for a house today is 288,000, or at least at the time of this recording. If you have an investment and it's growing in the market at 8.5% per year, and it gets to do that for 34 years, and the average house price today being 288,000, you get a 16 times multiple on your money over 34 years. If that is the case, how much would you need to invest today to be able to allow your child, if you were to gift that money to them, allow your child to buy a house in cash in 34 years' time? And that is £17,979. So what that means is, if your child is born and the day that they are born, you are able to set aside £18,000 for them, and this is real growth, this is after inflation, this is real buying power. If that's the case, then for £18,000 today, you would be able to buy them a house when they turn 34. That would be matching the average. So for university, the average price for university in the UK is about £22,000 a year. You're doing that for 3 years, so overall it's going to cost you 66,000. You only have 19 years now to save for that, assuming you start at birth. Obviously you can do this calculation for, let's say I want to have a child in 5 years time. Okay, then you can add another 5 years to that additional 19. You can get to 24, and you can redo that calculation based off of that. But assuming you start at birth, you give them 19 years, you get a 4.71 multiple on your money. To get to 66,000, you would need to invest 14,135. Weddings, the average age for a wedding, if you're female, is 33. If you're male, it's 35. So we are averaging that at 34. Your multiple on 34 years is the same as what it was for the house, is 16. Let's say you want to spend 40,000 in today's money on a wedding, or make a contribution towards the wedding for 40,000. That would only require 2,500 pounds in today's money to worry about that cost in 34 years' time. And that gets you a 16 times multiple on your money. First car, £6,600 is what the average person spends, but they do that when they're 20 years old. So you get a 20 years to grow the money, 8.5% per year. You get a 5.11 multiple on the money. So if you invested £1,291 in today's money, in 20 years time, that would be worth 6,600. And I understand a lot of these things are very luxurious. You might not be in a position financially to be able to make these types of contributions to your child at this point in their lives, in your life, but you need to understand these things, because you might be making choices, or you might be in a position to make these choices, but you don't do it because you don't have the awareness. And now I want to talk about the big one for me. For me personally, I think this is probably one of the biggest things to take into consideration. And this is retirement for your children. So I list it as the second most important thing, because I think the most important is teaching them good lessons and good life lessons and how to manage money. But if I had the money and I had the opportunity, this is what I would do. I would try and work out if I can invest the right amount to get your child to coast FI from birth. And the reason why I think retirement's so important, because even though the other ones are optional, they might go to university, they might not. If your child makes it to the age of 65, then they're retiring. That's almost guaranteed, or at least that's what you might want them to do. And the great advantage to this is it frees up an enormous amount of the money that they earn over their lifespan. So you're not giving them a gift of retirement, you're actually giving them a gift of potentially 10 to 20% of their income for the rest of their lives. They just never have to worry about adding to a retirement fund. They've already hit the requirements, leaving the money growing for 65 years is absolutely phenomenal compound growth. So what is Coast FI? Coast FI, as I just explained, is simply reaching a number financially where if you no longer invested or no longer added to your investments, it would grow on its own, so that by the time you hit retirement age in your 60s, it would be sufficiently large, despite inflation, despite everything else, that you would be able to live off of the income generated by the pot that you have built up. So there's two phases to Coast FI, and in the first phase, you're aggressively investing and saving to reach that financial independence number, the Coast number, where calculating forward, you will reach your ultimate FI number. And that's the first stage. The second stage is where you back off you take your pedal off the gas, you back off a bit in terms of how much you're investing into your investments and towards your retirement, because you've already hit your retirement goal in terms of what you will need when you retire. And I'm not saying don't add to the pot. I'm not saying at that point you need to pause your retirement. At that point, what most people do is they look at, okay, if I were to continue to invest, can I bring that date forward? Can I retire when I'm 50 instead of 65? So the advantages of Coast FI is it's much easier to hit that goal than hit your full FIRE number. And you can build up a really nice nest egg doing this. And it also allows you to continue to work, continue to build social connections, have a sense of worth in society, sense of belonging, feeling useful. But what it means, at least in the context of this video, in my opinion, is it means that your child will take it on themselves to go forward in that and retire early, where all they'll need to do is cover the gap. So all they need to worry about is going, okay, I'm covered for retirement from 65 onwards. Should I be looking at saving 10% a month and then try and retire when I'm 50 instead of 65? The disadvantages, I do want to mention it. It's hard to reduce your spending, and that's where a lot of the power comes from. So each pound that is saved per month in reducing your expenses ultimately has a huge multiple on your retirement number. And it's difficult to switch. Once you've hit it, it's difficult to back off and switch to a coasting role where you continue to work. So the question then becomes, let's say you're in a high stress work environment, making lots of money, and you're really gunning for this Coast FI number. Once you hit it, you're like, okay, now I want to take the pedal off the gas. I need to go find a new job. that's less stressful, or I need to figure out how to de-stress the current role that I'm in, where potentially I'm working 3 days a week instead of the 5, or whatever the case may be. You have to build a plan to deal with that. Of course, working out what Coast FI is also not easy. It's not straightforward. You have to estimate a growth rate. You have to plug in a growth rate value to go, okay, I think I'm going to get a return of 8% or 8.5% or 9%. And then I would say that the biggest variable is just estimating your living costs. So you don't know what your living costs are going to be like in a decade or 2 decades time, or even in 50 or 60 years time. So hitting that goal and going, oh no, but my living expenses have increased, by 50% over the last 4 years. Now I'm concerned that my Coast FI number is actually wrong. So this is the real power of Coast FI, and giving yourself a full 65 years of compound growth. If you invest £4,980 and 5 pence, and you give it 65 years to grow, that will be worth £1 million. That would generate an income in today's money, if you were to apply the 4% rule, of 40,000 per year forever, for the rest of their lives. Of course, the challenge here is you have to wait until they're 65 for that to happen, and you have to have the £4,980 when they're born. So the most important time is the early years. If I'm assuming 8.5% growth after inflation per year on average, that's 0.6821% growth per month, and we can plug those calculations in. I'm going to do that in a minute. That's fundamentally a doubling every 8.583 years, or 103 months. So the value of whatever is in that pot will double every 103 months. And that between 0 and 65 means you get 7.57 doublings. So whatever you put in gets multiplied by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2, etc., all the way times 1.569. So what that means is you have a 200.8 multiple on every pound that you invest. So if you invest £1, it becomes £200. If you invest £2, it becomes £400. You get a 200 multiple on this. And if you work out that calculation, you calculate it backwards, £1 million is 4,980.05. And now I want to just talk about those first 8.5 years, that first doubling. If you wait until your child is 8.5 years old, 8 years and 6 months, you lose a 100 multiple on your investments. So if you invest that 5,000 when they are 8.5, they're going to end up with $500,000 instead of 1 million. So you lose 100 multiple on your investment. So you go from the ability to gain 200.8 to 100.4. And that means that the first 8.5 years of the journey for your child is as important as the last 56.5 years. And I would like to emphasize, you can even start before they are born. You can put this money aside and not touch it before you have kids. If you're I want to be a mom in the next 3 years time person, or I want to have a family at this age, but I'm just not doing it yet, this is something to take into consideration. Don't save for the wedding, save for your child's future. So I just want to show you those calculations. So here I have some columns. You have your months remaining until you turn 65, your multiple, your current FI number, assuming you want to hit 1 million, you can obviously adjust that up or down, and the amount that you will need per month. So 1 million invested will generate 40,000 a year, which is roughly 3,333 a month. And you can just look at those values. You can draw it out in the table and go month by month and see exactly the child's age and what their current FI number actually is. So by the time this child is a year old, that 4,980 now becomes 5,403. So I'm just going to include the formulas in there as well. I've also included a link to a website that can convert annual percentages into monthly percentages. So if you want to work this out on an annual basis, you can do that. But if your child is 6 months old and you've just come around to potentially looking at this and you want to know, okay, but my child is 6 months old, how do I calculate it? Well, you can do this on a monthly basis as well. So I just wanted to show a couple of things here. Let's just go back. So you can definitely see here that you can also do this for yourself. So here, for example, by the time you get to 40 years old, you need 130,000 in investments. So not only is this really powerful as a tool to track where you're at in terms of your own investments, it's also a great way to track what you might need for your child if you were to make a contribution like this. And there you can see your multiple as well. So for somebody who's just turned 40, they need 130,113. Your multiple on that's going to be 7.69 between 40 and 65. You have 25 years, you get a 7.69 multiple on that. And then I just took a couple of years that parents think are quite important. So I've taken 8.5 because that's the doubling point. That's where you lose your first 100 multiple. So there you need now 9,962. 16 is another important year for a lot of parents. They just go, okay, out of school, starting to leave the nest. They would, by that point, they would need 18,300. By the time they turn 18, they would need 21,600. And if you're looking at 21 as like a year to aim for, they would need 27,600. So you can see how that number grows dramatically. And your multiple goes from 100 when they're 8.5 to 36 by the time they're 21. So you're losing a lot of that value as you go. So I want to also talk about locking it away. What if you don't trust your child to not spend the money when they turn 21? They're an adult, they should be receiving those funds. So the question then becomes, how do you manage that? So there's two ways to do this. The first thing is, and I would emphasize that this is probably the best option, is teach your child to manage money well. Teach them the importance of investments, help them to understand what they're invested in, help them understand what the value of these investments actually mean for them, that they'll never have to worry about saving for retirement if they leave this pot alone. But if you're not sure about that and you want to make absolutely sure, A, you can keep it in your own name until you die or your child turns 65. You can also speak to a solicitor or a financial advisor to assist you with the process. You could set up a trust. There are mechanisms and things that can be done that only make the money available to the child when they turn 65. And you can even stipulate additional requirements to that. So one of the things that we could talk about is generational wealth, where you can say, okay, I'm going to give you these funds. I'm going to let this account grow for 65 years. You are going to be able to access it when you turn 65. But one of the stipulations is that if you have children, i.e. your grandchildren, you have to set aside £5,000 for them at birth. And if you don't do that, that money comes out of this fund. So your grandchildren could automatically be covered in a situation where your child doesn't do this for their children. And I would also just add, and this is something that a solicitor or financial advisor would definitely probably speak to you about, is I would say medical exceptions. And what I mean by that is if a doctor tells you you're going to die in 12 months, then potentially unlocking the money before they turn 65 is something that you want to build into the mechanism that you use to control these funds, to ensure that they still have access to it. Assuming there is a situation where a doctor has said you have 12 months to live or you have 6 months to live, whether that's cancer or something else, it's definitely something to take into consideration. So as I mentioned, you can make this generational. All you do is you set up a prerequisite that if they want to access the funds, they have to do the same for their children, or if they aren't able to or don't want to do that for their kids, then what you can do is you can say, well, that money is going to get withdrawn from the account on the birth of that child and that wealth will get transferred to that child. You can also do this for grandchildren. If you want to just gift money to a grandchild, let's say you wanted to just gift them 5,000, which is their FI goal, FI number at birth. The average age that you have a first child in the UK is 29 years. If you have a child and you even say, I don't have enough right now to help my child. I don't have 5,000 right now to give to my child, so that in 65 years they will be able to retire. What you could do is go, okay, I'm going to set money aside so that when I have a grandchild, they will be able to have a retirement cover. They will be able to be Coast FI from birth. So how much is that going to cost me? Well, the average age is 29. You get a 10.65 multiple on your money. All you need is 5,000 in 29 years time. So that works out to £469.36 in today's money. So even if you don't have 5,000, you could lower it and go, okay, I might have 2 grandkids out of this, in 29 years time. I'm going to set aside £1,000 because that's all I can afford right now. So any contribution towards this could have a massive impact on your children's lives or your grandchildren's lives, where you are taking the burden off of yourself, your child, and potentially your grandchildren. So in conclusion, the easiest time to start is as soon as possible. My opinion, beg, borrow, and steal to get a lump sum to start this process before your child is born. This is an amazing gift for your child. And then I do want to just stipulate, this is my opinion. And if you think there are better alternatives, or if you believe that there is something else that you could potentially do for your child that would have a bigger impact on their lives in the long term, it would be great to hear from you. You feel free to email me or post in the comments. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Goodbye. If you like this content, please support my channel by liking, subscribing, or sharing it with your friends. If there's anything I missed and you would like us to cover, please comment below. And as I said earlier, if you want to discuss your specific financial situation on our channel, please feel free to email us at financialbasicsabc@gmail.com. Thank you.